Hi everyone, this is Rob from the Geek Show Podcast Network, and we're here with Michael here at Sunnycon 2018. And Michael is a classical Japanese musician. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. It's interesting. The two instruments I play, koto and shamisen, both have different demographics when you play them. The koto is very much an elitist instrument, played in court orchestras, and then it was noblemen's daughters who would learn it. Yeah. And the shamisen is very much an instrument of the people, so it provides the backing to folk songs and general entertainment.
I was going to say, because I've seen a lot of the the Japanese prints, and usually when you see the shamisen, it's usually a peasant or a farmer or a wanderer playing the shamisen. But whenever I've seen the koto, it's usually been one of those more stately pictures with the regal women.
Yes, sort of on the floor with the kimono playing along. Yeah. And it's very much like that. There's the obvious, reason that it's simply the size of the instrument.
Yeah.
The koto is 6 feet long, and although it's quite light, it's a bit like carrying around a plank. One end is going to get damaged if you're not too careful. The shamisen, obviously, it's easily portable, but also one thing a lot of people don't know is that the neck breaks down into 3 pieces. So you can pack it into a very small space to take around.
Okay.
And so wandering minstrels, it was very useful for them, and then they would just go to a town, set up, and accompany singers as they went round.
Wasn't there a thing one time where they used to have like musical instruments as assassination tools, and the shamisen had something to do with that as well?
It's interesting when you see some of the semi-historical dramas or the dramatic films of the sort of 60s and 70s, they do have the sort of, because the shamisen does pull apart, the idea that, you could conceal a knife inside the shaft of the instrument and maybe use that, or strangle people with the strings as you go round. Whether that actually happened or not, there's no evidence that. It's just somebody, imprinting a modern idea onto an ancient instrument.
Damn.
Sorry.
I thought that was really cool as well. I thought I'm gonna become a shamisen practitioner and then be a ninja.
Well, there is one thing that does have documentary evidence, which is there is a certain way of writing down the music. In Japan, they don't have a standard notation like we have. So, for example, in Western style, if you wrote down a piece of music using the staves, you could give that to a violin player and to a guitar player and to a harpist, and they'd all be able to play it because they could read it.
Yeah, I've noticed that about Japanese music. They don't really use 4/4 time or 4/3 time, do they?
Well, when they write down the music, each way of writing the music is unique to that instrument. So the music that I've got for the koto, if I gave that to a shamisen player, wouldn't be able to read it or play it. And there was in the olden days this system of writing down music for shamisen, where you could combine certain notes and certain tunings, and as they were playing, they could put a kind of message into the music. And so there was a way of secretively sort of informing people as you're playing. They'd tune into the notes and it'd be like a Morse code tapped out. To most people, it would still sound like music, but it would have a code in there.
That actually explains some things from some of the manga that I've read and some of the films I've watched, where there's scenes of people listening to music, and I've not understood that there's a message in the music. I've just thought, it's reminding them of something, but that clears that up in a big way. Wow, I did not expect that at all. So, just focusing on the koto a little bit. The koto, to my ear, to my untrained ear, sounds a bit like the Western harp.
Yes, yeah. I mean, quite often people do refer to it as a Japanese harp. I mean, if you're going to be picky, it's a part of the zither family because it has the bridges rather than the string being just across the frame without any impediment. But yeah, the sound is really akin to the harp. And the good thing about the koto, although it's got 13 strings, which seems limiting, by moving the bridges backwards and forwards, you can tune it to any scale. So today I played in pentatonic scale, which is an oriental scale, but you could tune it chromatically to the Western scale and play along with a harpist, and you probably wouldn't hear much of a difference between the two.
Okay. So how much training does it take to actually learn how to play the koto and the shamisen?
I do workshops sometimes at a lot of universities who have a Japan society sort of ask me to come along, do a performance, and then do a little workshop. Yeah. And I can teach people to play a basic tune within 5 minutes. The koto is one of the simplest instruments I know. I mean, I collect musical instruments from around the world and try and learn a little bit on them. And the koto looks difficult, but it's very straightforward. Whereas with a flute or a violin, you have to lock yourself in the broom cupboard for about 6 months before you can even get a nice note. With the koto, you can get a nice sound straight away. With the basic learning pieces, the beginner pieces, usually once you've played a string, the next note is one in front or one behind, which actually you find with a lot of folk music is the case because people play by ear rather than listening. So it's a daunting instrument when you look at it, but it's a very easy melody instrument to pick up. Very easy. So 5-10 minutes, you can be playing a basic piece, just sort of one note at a time. To get to kind of level where you can accompany yourself with the other hand, you're looking at about 1 or 2 years. So it's still fairly, short time for a lot of instruments.
Okay. My equivalent of what you just said is basically having a little electronic keyboard in secondary school and learning how to play the EastEnders thing.
Yes. So maybe you start with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with one, and then you get a few fingers of the right hand, and then you bring in the left. Yes.
And then they moved me up to the flute. I hated the flute. it was exactly what you said. 6 months of just solid practice, and I could just about make a noise.
Yeah, you get a squeak, don't you?
But yeah, what about the shamisen then? Is the shamisen very different to learn?
Yes, I mean, when I first went to Japan, because I'm interested in ethnomusicology anyway, I wanted to learn the musical instruments. Yeah. And it was strange. The question I got from a lot of Japanese people was why? Why do you want to learn something about our culture? Which seems bizarre, because I said to them, well, I can learn a violin or a guitar anywhere around the world, but this musicians, this is unique to your country. And I loved the sound of the coat, and I thought, I want to play that, but I was daunted by the look of it. I mean, when you see it, it looks like a mass of strings. It's just like, you can't apply any previous knowledge to how to play it. Yeah. And because I played already the guitar, banjo, mandolin, I took up the shamisen first of all, because it's got the sort of the same shape. But actually, it turns out to be a much harder technique. Whereas with a lot of Western stringed instruments, like the guitar, you play them next to your body. With the shamisen, you play it away with a gap between them, because it's not very resonant on its own.
You mentioned in your workshop downstairs that it was a bit more like the sitar, which I'm more used to being Asian.
Yes, yeah. Again, there's a kind of gap between the body, and that felt really unnatural. But then... Yeah. With the left hand, you can play with your fingernail, but usually use a bachi, which is a really oversized pick. And coming from guitar, where you've got a tiny pick between your fingers, holding something which is bigger than your hand to pluck the strings was difficult.
Yeah.
The two most difficult things, actually, that I found was one, that your hand has to be at 90 degrees, and after about 5 minutes, your wrist is aching. Yeah. And the other thing is, a lot of the traditional instruments, I learnt when you try to find a teacher of them in Japan, it's usually, rather than a studio or a particular music school, it's somebody's house that you go into, and they pass it on to you individually. And so quite often I was actually kneeling for long periods of time on the floor, and that was one of the hardest things. I'd have to get up after about 15 minutes, and then after about a month's worth of lessons, I could get down to about 20 minutes and then half an hour. And
so is that how you play? How you play? Traditionally, you sit in Caesar.
Yes. Today, basically, because everyone else would be on seats, so that they could see I played it on a stand. But normally that would be on the floor. Yeah. And the same with the shamisen. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. It's interesting you say that. You were talking about learning it in someone's house, because I've been watching NHK World. It's one of my favorite channels on TV, and they have a guy, a blonde Westerner, who actually is really good at rakugo.
Oh, yes.
I saw an interview with him, and he was explaining it was very similar how you learned shamisen.
Yes.
How he learned rakugo. Yeah. He basically went into someone's house and he learned it at the feet of a different master.
Yes. I mean, it's very individual learning, and when I went to Japan, it's very easy to see adverts for Western instruments like piano school, because a lot of Japanese children, take up Western instruments, and you go. I worked in the schools, and they have a school brass band and all that. And you look at the textbook for music for the high school students, and it's all about Western composers or Japanese composers who've learnt the Western style. Yeah. And there's about 6 pages out of 200 that are just for Japanese instruments. Yeah. So trying to find somebody who knows somebody who teaches it is quite tricky when you get over there. And it's just that word of mouth, that networking with people in the neighborhood. Oh yeah, I think my neighbor teaches that kind of style. If you can find a traditional Japanese instrument maker, which again is fairly rare, but at least you'll find those in the center of most major towns. And I had to go to them and ask, look, is there anybody you can recommend? Because the teachers will go to them to get their supplies, and so they could suggest, this person, or this person's already taught a Westerner before, so maybe make it an easier style. But that was fairly easy. I did try a couple of teachers, because a few of them were nervous that they've got the musical skill, but they were worried about communicating that. Yeah. But in Japanese music, a lot of the time when you're learning, the idea is that the teacher is a perfect example, and they will play it and you will copy them. So it's not about the language you use to express it verbally. It's about watching and listening and following. So that's kind of universal.
Awesome. Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Your performance.